Hey reader, this is Centaur here, and we are continuing our ranking video series looking at the armies in second edition and how they've changed going to third edition. Today we're looking at 14th place. At this point, we are solidly in the middle of the pack. The armies that we're looking at from here on out, they have good options, they play well. If you choose to pick this up, sure, like you could find a more competitive army, but you're looking at an army that has options that cover everything, and that's fantastic. And today we're looking, which ironically, if you know the list, this is an ironic photo that you'll find in the armies of Italy in the Axis book. We're looking at Romania. Okay. And I say this is ironic for reasons we'll get into in about 30 seconds or so. But suffice it to say, Romania is one of the first Axis armies that actually kind of spoke to me, as I was just kind of thumbing through the books because like I bought the Germany and the Italy book before I ended up actually like looking into what I wanted to get, and then I knew that at some point I was probably going to collect Japan, but just funds being what they were at the time, I didn't want to buy a third book all at once. And as I was looking through, I was like, oh, there's a very interesting thing that you can do if you're a me kind of person, because of what my personal biases are that I mentioned even as early as my intro video to the channel. And I was like, oh, dude, this would be awesome. And I'm not going to lie, there were certain things that I really loved what I saw in Romania, and there were certain things that I did not love. Now, fast forward, thanks to other books that we got afterwards, new units got added to Romania. So just know that if you're listening to this review and you only have the armies of Italy and the Axis book, there's going to be some stuff I'm going to be talking about that's going to improve a lot of what you see in the list. And if you didn't know about those things, you might think, how the heck did Romania get to 14th place? I'm looking at all of the units from second edition and then looking at them, and what they added weren't really traps. In fact, they kind of got you out of some of the easy trap units that came in the original book. So to start off with, we're going to take a look at the army special rules that we have for Romania. Okay. And the truth is they only have two, and they're relatively straightforward. The first is one we've seen before with Bulgaria, which is Axis support, where you can take one German or Italian unit. There are two restrictions on this. You can't take anything above a damage value of 9, and you can't take anything veteran, okay, which cuts out a few things, the biggest one being German pioneers. You don't really need German pioneers in this army for reasons that we'll discuss later, but that's one of the big things that you kind of miss with those. But otherwise, I mean, most of the stuff that you have access to, you also have access to through there. But I will be making notes as we go along on which units I would probably take in any given section if I was trying to fill it with an Axis support unit. The second rule that they get is the forward artillery doctrine, which we've also talked about because we've talked about things from the Francosphere. Armies like the Netherlands also get this one, where you can choose either a free light or medium howitzer or a free light or medium anti-tank gun. And I think there are technically, with Romania, reasons to do either of these. At the medium level, I wouldn't take any of these at the light level because you know what? You're getting it for free. You might as well take the upgrade to the higher level gun. The medium AT gun would be useful if you're not planning on running tank destroyers, because your tank destroyers are pretty soft. I think they're pretty okay, but they're pretty soft. And if you want some extra firepower, medium AT gun allows you to do better armor removal. All around, I think the medium howitzer is probably the better option. But again, it goes back to your strategy. If you really want to remove armor, if you know somebody's going to be running an M3 Stuart or an early war Panzer III or an M1542 for the Italians or a Char 2C or something like that, and you know that that unit is going to mess up the few durable units that you have, one might consider saying, well, we need to knock it out. We can't just afford to try to pin something. If we hit it, we need to actually do something serious to it so that we can work around it. If that's the case, medium AT gun, perfectly serviceable. I don't think it's necessarily the best option here, but the way I see it, even if it's suboptimal, it's free. So it doesn't hurt as much. Okay. And as we'll soon see, the synergies that you get with the rest of Romania actually make it so that these two things working in concert together as two special rules can make you quite powerful at making things a lot more reliable that would otherwise be a roll of a dice. So toward that end, as we look at officers, not a whole lot that's going on here. We get, the normal spread of inexperienced to veteran officers, which is nice. You can take them cheap. You can take them, higher level to make them a better assault unit with submachine guns. Both of those are great because, as you're going to discover in Romania, we don't get access to a lot of submachine guns or assault weapons in general, which means you might want some. Okay. I think there are better options for Romania personally. But if you're looking for something that can fight up close and personal, maybe a two-man or three-man officer squad with submachine guns is a good idea. It's up to you as to what you want to do. Your forward observers are slightly better than average, mostly because, and this is where the irony comes in, you don't get an air observer. So you can't call in an airplane, even though the picture at the start of the Romanian book, and they had these, by the way, is they had airplanes, okay? And a decent number, not like a ton. They didn't have a large, massive number of aircraft, but they had more aircraft than Bulgaria had 155 millimeter howitzers, and Bulgaria gets access to 155 millimeter howitzers. And so, by the way, if you haven't figured this out yet, that's kind of my baseline. 32. If you have 32 and Bulgaria had 32 heavy artillery and they get access to it in the book, for me, I think that's the clear line of, okay, you should get access to the unit. Okay. Yes, like there were, like 10 Horo assault guns for Japan, probably about the same for the Char 2C or whatever, but everybody knows like those were unique sort of stuff. If you have 32 of something and you could fill two full batteries with something, then you should probably count. So that's kind of my baseline. So when we get into units that we should add, we're going to talk about the air observer. Okay. Your medics are fine. You get, I mean, I think it's just the veteran medic. I wouldn't probably take it. I would skip on that one. You don't get any special officers and for access support because I don't think you can take a second platoon commander. Not that I think it would be a good idea to take a second lieutenant again. I would just skip over this. I don't think you need it. Save it for something else. For your infantry, you actually don't get any. It's kind of weird, but there it is. And then for your regulars, they're fine. You get access to a bunch of rifles, access to a light machine gun. Your NCO starts with a submachine gun, but you can upgrade him so that he has a rifle instead. Okay. And then your border infantry just don't start with the SMG and you have a chance to add it later. So, as a supporting fire unit, your regulars are fine. Your veterans are fine. Once again, we have cavalry that can't charge, which is not great. So I'd probably just avoid it, to be honest, which is sad because I'm a cavalry guy through and through, but I probably just would. Your veterans are very similar, built for supporting fire, not really built for assault. And then we do have a couple of specialist infantry here. Okay, the first is we get combat pioneers, which are engineers who can take the flamethrower. You can take, some close combat assault weapons, and you can take them regular or veteran, which is really nice. While the Germans get access to veteran pioneers, honestly, like, I don't know, man. Like you can take them veteran if you want to. I think honestly, regular is probably better in second edition, especially if you have a transport to move them up and get them in, so that way they're in and out really quickly. I just don't see you needing necessarily to take them veteran. I think you can save yourself some points, and you're going to need those for later because we're going to be buying a lot of stuff near the top of the chain. Okay. You also get access to mountain infantry. Mountain infantry gives you access to the fieldcraft rule, so effectively, so you get to treat open ground, rough ground as if it's open ground, for basically every kind of rough ground. This is nice because you want to have fast, mobile infantry, and you don't really want to use your cavalry. So your mountain infantry actually do a really good job, and they're quite affordable because you can take them regular. You get access support kind of here. The truth is, because you can't take veterans, so you can't take, for example, like veteran here grenadier with a ton of assault weapons to get yourself a real close combat assault unit, which, complete aside, by the way, this is why Romania is in the middle, is because they lack good options in the realm of assault other than throw flamethrowers at the problem and hope that that works, which is a fine answer. It's just not a complete answer to what you want, especially if there's snipers around. But if you were to take something, you could take Volksgrenadiers. And Volksgrenadiers are a perfectly fine assault unit. You can throw, assault rifles and stuff like that on there if you really want to. I don't know that I'd go the assault rifle route personally, but, one can do that. And they have a decent chance of upgrading to regular and even a chance of upgrading to veteran. So, they're fine. I've found that Volksgrenadiers work out okay. They're very serviceable infantry. I know that Morty and Glory has had quite a bit of success with Volksgrenadiers. So one might look at that. You could also just look at here grenadiers if you wanted to. I don't think you get anything really out of it other than access to more than one Panzerfaust. So I probably wouldn't do that either. I would just skip. I don't think you get enough out of this, but hypothetically, you could add one infantry section if you wanted to through access support. For team weapons, you get medium machine gun teams. They're fine. Not great in second edition, but nothing special going on here. You get mortar teams, which are actually pretty good. You get access to all three kinds of mortars. I would probably lean medium or heavy myself. But if you want to save some points, I guess you could go light. Some people like light mortars. I do not. So, do what you want. Your anti-tank teams are not good because you are limited to exactly one, and it's the Panzerschreck. Now, to be clear, the Panzerschreck is a powerful anti-tank team, and I've been working on a top 10 ranking video, which is actually more like a top 17 ranking video, to be honest, for infantry-based anti-tank teams in second and third edition. And I'm not going to lie, the Panzerschreck is powerful, but for what you're paying for it, it's a lot of points. And because it's a two-man team and you probably don't want to pay over 100 points to take it veteran, you're probably taking it regular. And so I'm going to be honest, if they get shot at and they're not in heavy cover, you're in trouble. Especially if it's something that's really serious that has a machine gun or two on it. You could lose this team in one shot, and it's a lot of points down the drain. Furthermore, because you're probably moving and shooting in order to get into that 24-inch range, your first shot is going to be off on fives, probably. Could be fours, but it's probably going to be closer to fives, is what I would expect. So it's dicey. It's dicey trying to get the first shot to work. You may not live to see a second. It's a difficult proposition. Okay. So if they had access to something like an AT rifle as well, you would have a cheaper option, which I think would work out just fine. You also have sniper teams. Your sniper teams are average, nothing special going on here. Again, you take them regular veteran, nothing, no special rules, nothing cool. Your flamethrower teams are fine. You get regular and veteran, no special rules to help them out. And you don't get any special team weapons. So if I was looking at things to add with access support, I would look at probably another mortar or flamethrower team, possibly. This might also be an opportunity, either from Italy or Germany, to add an anti-tank rifle team, though. Just something cheap to fill that anti-tank role, throw some pins down range. Can also work really well at doing wounds to regular infantry, possibly even veterans. So on the whole, I mean, I think it's an option. And again, it's cheap, right? It's 30 points regular in second edition. So, something that you can throw in case you just need that extra order dice. Not a bad option. For artillery, your howitzers are good. Not because you get anything special, but because you get quantity, right? You get the free one, you get the normal one, and as you'll see down below in access support, you can take a third one with the access support rule, which means you can set up, medium howitzers, for example, all across the board. And there's nowhere people can go to avoid your templates. You can cover all the major lines of fire, make it so that enemy armor is really going to have a tough time, or you can stack them, maybe close to your officer, so that way you're getting the morale bonus to make sure that they keep firing. And you can really pound stuff in one area, right? So you have quite a few options there. And again, they can all take spotters, which is excellent. You get anti-tank guns. They're, I mean, not great. You get not only the light and medium AT guns, you can also get bigger AT guns at heavy. I wouldn't go big, honestly, like, maybe a medium AT gun, but on the whole, I would stay basically with the lighter stuff if you really want one. For the anti-aircraft guns, I mean, they're good. You get access to very serviceable autocannons. Autocannons rate well for me. And you get access to multiple rocket launchers if you use your access support slot to do that, which you could do if you really wanted to. As we look at armor support, things are interesting. So I'm going to be honest. First of all, your tanks are not that great. Okay. You do get access to some pretty cheap armored options with things like the Renault R35 if you want to take one of those. I think the best option would be the Panzer 38T. It's a perfectly serviceable early war tank, damage IU 8, light AT gun, coaxial machine gun, forward facing machine gun. I'm going to level with you 100%. I don't think it's that great. I would probably pass on it. Personally, I would go with a tank destroyer, one of the TACM's tanks. I like I think it's the R2 TACM, which has it basically just adds the machine gun, right, to the normal medium anti-tank gun. I'm going to be honest, if you're fighting an army that doesn't run big armor, for fighting partisans or something like that, you're wasting points here. Okay. But the truth is, you don't get access to any self-propelled guns, so you can't take a howitzer on any of these. You don't get any anti-aircraft platforms, so you can't get easy access to large numbers of machine guns, auto cannons, things like that. And you don't get any sort of specialist vehicles. So, like, the TACM kind of sits above a bunch of the others. It is also unique, so I'm a big fan of being able to include things like that in an army. but you're hurting in the armored section. This is another reason why this falls to middle of the pack. And this is one of the places where Axis support could be a really good option. Okay. If you want to be cheap, you can spend like 50 points regular on an Opel Blitz AA, which is just a single light autocannon on the bed of a truck. You can upgrade that though up to like 155 points regular to take a basically a flak Veerling on the back of that Opel Blitz. And personally, I think that's probably how I would do it if that's what I wanted to do. Because I mean that thing will shred. It will shred. Now, if you want something a little more durable, you can take the exact same concept and put it in an open top damage value 9 chassis and take a Verbal Wind, which could also work. Uh, from experience, people will say like, "Oh, well, just pin that thing, and that's how you handle a verbal wind." From personal experience, having been shot up by one of those things, that's actually harder than it sounds. Especially if the Romanian gets the benefit of a deployment advantage. So, if they have, call it like 14 order dice instead of like 15 to 18 order dice at 1,000 points, you might see that more and more of your opponent's dice are being drawn out before the last of yours are drawn out, which means you'll have a better idea of where their anti-tank and anti-armor assets are, and you can set up the verbal wind accordingly. So you'll find, by the way, that in the list that we're about to take a look at in a couple slides, that I've intentionally gone slightly below 15 for the order dice pool. That's because I wanted to have the deployment advantage for deploying my armored vehicle. Okay. So those are options. I think the more obvious options are to go the Panzer route. As good as the M1542 is, and you can totally take one if you want to, you can save yourself some points and get something perfectly serviceable with a Panzer III, Panzer I, or a Panzer II. You can still take a large number of machine guns. You get an autocannon on the Panzer II. You can take Recce on the Panzer II and turn it into a Panzer II looks. All of these things are fantastic. So if you're looking for Axis support in a move that's going to surprise absolutely nobody, Germany has you covered. Okay, because they do have a very, very good tank selection. For the armored cars, your tankette, the R1 tankette, is actually really good. More on that when we talk about the changes with third edition. For your armored cars are pretty good. You get access to the SDK of Z222, which is perfectly fine. And if you were to do Axis support here, I'd go one of two routes. I would either take just a second 222, because then you've got, double light auto cannons on zippy chassis, which is great. Or you could go a little bit heavier and you could take like a 234 Puma. If you wanted to tank duel, but maybe you didn't want to pay for a relatively fragile tank destroyer, you could take the Puma, which is damage value 8, which is serviceable. It has a medium anti-tank gun with a coaxial machine gun, so it can do something to infantry, but it can still tank duel. And it's still one of those nice, zippy, quite survivable armored cars. So you could go this route if you really wanted to, just get a little bit of extra punching power, and it can move up very quickly and start fighting pretty close as early as turn 1. So, might be worth taking a look at. When you look at transports, for soft transports, they get access to the Civic cars and the trucks that we're all used to. Their armored carriers are actually really bad. You get access to very overpriced, not particularly useful armored carriers because you don't have good assault units. And this is fundamentally what it comes down to, right? Like you can technically put combat pioneers in there. I think you're just better putting them in a truck, honestly, because you don't need to take them as like an 8 or 9 man unit. Just put them in a truck. It'll probably work better. You could probably put potentially even 2 of them in the same truck if you wanted to. Okay. For gun transports, I mean, they're fine because you can pintle mount a machine gun now on trucks, right? As of the most recent errata, you get access to that. So in that sense, they're fine. They're serviceable. You can get some very cheap supporting fire for about the same cost as a regular machine gun team for 4 points more. You can get it on a damage value 6 chassis, so slightly harder to wound. Still get access to the damage chart as a second edition, and it can move and fire in the same turn, and potentially move pretty far if it's on a road the entire time. So I think you're probably better in that regards. Your tows are great, mostly because you get horse-drawn limbers and a cheap tractor. Nice and easy. And your gun tows, you don't get any. So if I was looking at Axis support, personally, I wouldn't in the transport section. I'll stump the Landwasser Schlepper every single time, right? So, I'll just mention it here. 20-man capacity, damage value 6. It can move through water. It can move through rough terrain. Means it can move through almost anything unless it's a building, impassable terrain, or lava, right? Basically everything it can move through. So, personally, like, could be a great way to move some combat pioneers up into there because you could easily fit 3 of them in there, maybe even with an officer team. Take 3 6-man teams with an officer with an extra dude, throw them all in the same transport, and now at least you're getting a morale bubble to help you out in case you get pinned when you're in there. But personally, I think you can do way better than taking like a 60-point regular unarmored transport for large amounts of guys. So, what are your best choices? I think your Pioneer and Mountain Infantry are a really good option. You want something that's mobile and can move up fast without a transport. You want something you can quickly transport out and start dropping fire on people. Both of those are really good. So I'd basically ditch everything that you find in the original book, and I feel bad saying that, but there it is. You get access to mortar and flamethrowers. Those are great. You can take up to 3 howitzers if you're willing to spend your access support there. That's really fantastic. Your TACOM tank destroyers, especially the R2, I think are worth going, and your armored car slot is really good. I think you really can't go too far wrong with the armored car slot. You can take trucks and cars to transport the flamethrowers. Don't go for the armored transport route. And so toward that end, when you're looking at the army list, I would do this. I would do a lieutenant with a furtherman. Take them regular. That way, you're still a small team, but you can give them both submachine guns, and they work as a serviceable assisting, fighting, close range fighting unit. Take 2 squads of 7-man combat pioneers, throw in the flamethrower and 4 submachine guns with a Panzerfaust. These are deadly, right? Because you could pop straight out of the transport that we're inevitably going to be taking these guys in, and the flamethrower can start going to work on either an infantry section or a tank section or something like that. You can throw a Panzerfaust at something else. You can then throw the rest of the shots coming from the guys into, 3 shots, I guess. Well, no, actually, yeah. If you put the Panzerfaust on a rifleman, you could fire that off, and then you've got your lieutenant with a submachine gun, 3 extra dudes with a submachine gun, flamethrower, and then the assistant doesn't have anything special. You could do something like that if you wanted to. In which case, you could fire off the Panzerfaust, the flamethrower, and all 4 SMGs all in the same turn. And then we got 2 squads of Mountain Division infantry. Take those veteran. Also, I made a mistake earlier. You can't actually take those guys regular, I don't think. I think you have to take them vet, which is fine. Because these guys will be durable. They'll move up from the sides, help to secure objectives that are more far-flung, which is good. Throwing in an inexperienced heavy mortar. I tend to be a medium mortar guy, but hey, I had the points. Basically, I couldn't get too much extra for reasons that you'll see in a little bit. So I was like, you know what? We'll just go up to the heavy mortar. It's basically an extra medium artillery that can only fire indirect, basically, right? Because it still has a 72-inch long range, and it's got the Pen +3 with the 3-inch template. So pretty solid. Throwing a regular flamethrower team, I don't really think you need these guys veteran. If they're getting shot at and they get 2 wounds, you're probably going to lose it anyway, so it doesn't really matter. And then I'm going for my artillery doctrine and access support. I'm taking regular medium artilleries and taking those with spotters. So we've got the triple threat going on down range. I went with the Panzer 38T just because the points worked out better to do it that way, to be completely honest. And then I'm taking 2 regular trucks with machine guns, and they'll be carrying a squad of pioneers each, and then one will have the lieutenant and one will have the flamethrower. Throw in a horse-drawn limber to round it out, and at 997 points, you've got 14 order dice. Because again, we want to see where our opponent's dropping things before we're dropping down trucks filled with guys or artillery. So we intentionally want to have less order dice in the bag for deployment advantage. And then when it comes to actually drawing out the units and actually going through stuff, a lot of our stuff is either going to have gun shields or decent armor, or they're going to be tucked away, hidden behind the little bit of terrain that we have near our deployment zone. That in an ideal world, we shouldn't actually need the first few draws on turn 1. Starting from turn 2, hopefully we're able to start dropping enemy order dice, and then we should be competitive starting turn 3 or turn 4. So looking at 3rd edition, where are we at? First of all, the army rules are kind of meh, for lack of a better term. Forward artillery doctrine means we get 2 shots with our artillery observer. Gives you a reason to take something you weren't really taking before, to be honest. So I guess yay on that one. And you've still got access support, so we can still take a thing. So great, but not really all that great, honestly. It's kind of lost all of its flavorful infantry. You're basically just down to regular infantry and your cavalry. So we're basically back to where we were in the original book. And I suspect, by the way, before people start kind of dunking on this, I suspect the reason why is because when you look at the armies of US and the armies of Germany books that have been released, one of the things they've kind of focused on in their release schedule for the emails coming out before the book drops on pre-order is how you get some unique and specialized stuff that appears in there. And I think they were honest about the fact that there really wasn't that much for Romania. Nothing really they could add beyond what they already had in a bunch of the other books. So they streamlined down, they get you by PDF, so that way they have something special that they can throw into the army book to sweeten you actually buying the army book. And on the one hand, it feels bad for us playing right now, considering we don't know when we're getting that book. We would all like to think that we're going to get a bunch of the minor nations by 2026, but let's be honest, could be 2027 or even 2028. This is being recorded in 2025. if people are forced to play with this army as written in the PDF for 2 to 3 years, there's not a lot here. Okay. I am chomping at the bit to build a Romanian army. I am not building it with this PDF. I'm just going to put it off. Admittedly, I mean, I got too many projects to work on as it is. So, like, I'm not the target audience. But for the poor people who invested in Romania, they're going to be waiting a long time before they get anything with flavor at all. And that's kind of sad. They can still get access technically to, 2 to 3 howitzers because of the new platoon structure, but that's not unique anymore. So while they technically still have the same play style and you can still use all the units that you had before, which is fantastic, other people can do the exact same thing. And arguably other people can do it better because they might have infantry that are filling better roles. They might have better transports for moving people up. They might have better threats for dealing with your 2 to 3 howitzers plus your artillery observer. And so because of that, like it's fine, but I don't think it's great. The TACM tank destroyer changed. You don't get the access to the machine gun anymore. It's just the original TACM tank destroyer with just the medium anti-tank gun, which is fine as a budget tank dueler. But if you hit an army that doesn't have a lot of tanks, or if you're overpaying for that medium anti-tank gun because you're running into like a tankette swarm, you can find yourself in a lot of trouble because these things are relatively fragile. And sure, they got pretty high firepower. That's how they get to the point cost that they are. But they're relatively high point costs if you don't have something big to shoot at. They also lost all of the armored cars, which isn't surprising because they got all of those in the extra books. But that means you're literally just looking at like a Renault and a Tacom, and that's it, which is not great. So in an ironic step, even though in general the platoon structure really does favor a lot of armies in terms of building firepower and options with third edition, and especially for minor nations that didn't have the depth that some of those, larger Axis and Allies nations had, this oddly feels like a step back from second edition. You actually have less options. So if we were doing this as a third edition ranking, I think Romania would actually be lower than it currently is because of where it currently stands with the Get You By PDF. So what changes would I make? First of all, just in general, I would give them access to air observers. They had in Air Force, they had 600 fighters and bombers at one point, which is a lot. Okay. So in my opinion, they should get access to an Air Force. Okay. I would also, I was on record with this with Bulgaria, and I will continue saying it when we talk about Hungary as well. I don't like the access support special rule. I think we should just scratch the access support special rule, replace it with better special rules, and give them in their army list access to the German or Italian units that they actually used. Okay. I also think we should give them their flavor units. So I would love to see a Romanian army that had mountain infantry. It was heavily involved with the taking of Edessa, very heavily involved in the siege, should make an appearance. Okay. If you can throw in some extras, which, we'll talk about a little bit later, I would also do that. Okay. I would also personally add the captured T20 Komsomlet, similar to what we do with Finland, but I would adjust the way that Finland and Romania get it by doing it the way that Bo Mortensen and David Hasselfeld from the Danish, in the Danish pack are doing it with their Commander's Compendium, which is instead of making it just a straight like 25-point reduction in cost, I would make it like a 15% reduction in cost. So that way it's still reasonably costed, but you're getting things for cheaper. Okay. They captured 34 of these during their campaign as part of Operation Barbarossa. And again, it meets the requirement of it is more than the 32 heavy artillery that Bulgaria get. So they should get access to it. And I think that would be interesting. It would give you access to an armored carrier that's decent and well costed and would do a good job for you to carry up your hopefully flavorful units that you can use closer at closer ranges. In terms of new special rules, following my mantra, I would give you 2 starting special rules and then a choice of your third. And these are designed to show the different things that Romania did during really the one major campaign they were involved with, which was Barbarossa. They intentionally sat out the invasion of Poland, which I think was probably a wise idea on the whole. They weren't needed in that. I don't blame them for any of those decisions. So toward that end, we're going to start with the rule for the Siege of Odessa. And this is where we're going to get some interesting and unique ways to do synergy between units to reflect what the Romanians actually did. And that is that when an artillery unit within 24 inches of an infantry that has moved, so they have already received a run or advanced order, when they are activated and they choose to shoot, so this could be it could be a fire action, it could be an advance action, it could be an ambush action. As long as there's an infantry unit within 24 inches that has already moved, run or advance, then they can reroll there to hit rolls. They're providing The enemy has distracted and it gives them a little more time to be able to line everything up and range in and fire. Now, keep in mind, this is just re-rolling their to hit roll. This means if you're firing direct, take whatever you're rolling, roll it a second time. If it's indirect, you would get a re-roll on your indirect fire, but it's not ranged in, right? So you wouldn't roll for sixes and then the re-roll would be on fives. It would stay on sixes, right? Or whatever you're doing. And the flip side of this is that whenever an infantry unit within 24 inches of a firing artillery unit, so they have to be assigned the fire order or advance order. Ambush means you haven't fired yet. Okay. Fire or advance. Then the infantry gets to remove D2 pins before they activate. So even before they declare an order test, before they have to roll for anything, they immediately remove D2 pins. They hear the guns are firing down range, they know that the enemy is being suppressed, they feel more willing to go in. And I'm telling you, a lot of guns supporting an awful lot of men and a lot of casualties, by the way, were required in order to take Odessa, but the Romanians did it. And they did it with this approach of infantry being supported by artillery, artillery having the freedom to do stuff because infantry were pushing up aggressively to challenge what the enemy could actually shoot at. And I think that's a really interesting mechanic, and it kind of leans into what you had in second edition. And so if you wanted to use these rules for second edition, you can actually make it work quite nicely because you can spread out where your guns are. Some people might say 24 inches is pretty far. If we didn't make it this way, you would only get your special rule pretty much for turn one. And so I think 24 inches is fine because most people can play from the middle of the board if they want to. Decent number of scenarios will allow you to play up to the middle of the board. And so I think it remains a special rule that you get to use beyond just turn one, maybe even turn two. The second one is, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm not good at pronouncing Romanian names. I took a little bit of Latin in junior high, so hopefully this is gonna help me out. The Defensa Ploiesti, where flak units can reroll hits versus aircraft, and they can reroll one damage roll versus vehicles. Now, you don't get very many of these. You get access to the SDK of Z222 in second edition. As you go into third edition, it's mostly like pintle-mounted machine guns, right, that you're getting access to. But being able to better drive off aircraft, which are more likely to appear in third edition, thanks to the changes that they made to air observers. I would make some additional changes to air observers, but we'll talk about that in a future video. But in addition to that, it also means that they do get to re-roll a damage roll against vehicles. With autocannons in particular, this is nice. It's kind of a light version of the Italian rule from Case Blue, which was a fine special rule and didn't seem to be overpowered out of all the rules from Case Blue. So, hey, give them access to one rerollable dice. I think it's good, and it kind of encourages you to run flak units. Obviously, in third edition, since you get access to anti-aircraft guns, it also gives you a reason not to always take howitzers, right? You might take a split between some artillery and taking some anti-air guns because you might want to take advantage of this. And then for the choice, I would give you the choice of the Venatori da Mundi, which was a kind of specialized version of infantry and basically just gives your infantry the Fieldcraft special rule. The company that you're leading are specialists who are good at moving through difficult and rough terrain for long extended periods of time, all along the Romanian border. And then I would give you access to forward artillery reduction. If you really like getting two shots with the artillery observer, is pretty interesting. Combine that with a recce platoon, you can actually get quite a bit of value out of that. Could be pretty fun if you really want to go for it. But I don't know. I think it's kind of boring because everybody else already has that. So if you like it, you can have it, but I'm not going to require it and mandate it. Okay. On the whole, what are my thoughts on Romania? I think the Romanians did a lot more in the war than people give them credit for. Okay. A lot of people, they're like, oh, Romania participated? Oh, I had no idea. Right. And fair enough, because there's not a lot written. It's not like they really jumped in until 1942. They spent the major push trying to help with Operation Barbarossa moving up. They did a large job in securing Crimea to secure that flank as people were headed over to the Caucasus. And then pretty much they just tried to protect the flank from Soviet aggression. And then when the spur of the attack kind of started falling apart, they were involved in some of the rearguard actions and then eventually just were on their own in the rearguard action until Romania was reached by the Soviets. And then peace treaty, and then they ended up switching over to the Allies, actually. And so one of the things that, I mean, hey, I'm not going to lie, it would be kind of interesting to see an Allies version of Romania that doesn't get Axis support, but gets Allied support, and you get a bunch of Soviet stuff, which would be interesting. On the whole, like I think there's a lot of options here to make this really flavorful and really interesting. Do I think that Romania needs its own book? Not necessarily. If I'm Osprey Games and I want to make some money printing stuff, I would probably just make it its own book on its own, and really lean into the Operation Barbarossa and then the approach of the Soviets into Romania, and maybe some of that fighting there in Eastern Europe. But on the whole, you could probably get away with mixing them in with Hungary and you'd be fine. Right. I do think it's a good idea to split them out from groups like Italy because while Italy was obviously involved in places where Romania was, they were also involved in a lot of other places. And I would like to see Italy get its own book. So, on the whole, we'll see what they do with third edition. Again, I'm not holding out hope for when exactly we're going to hear about the book. I'm not planning on it being 2026. But when it does happen, like there's enough history here and some interesting things that they did that I would love to collect a Romanian army. I'm just looking for something interesting in it so that way I'm not just building models for the fun of it. If you've enjoyed this, you guys know what to do down in the description below. If there's anything that I missed, if there was something that the Romanians had access to that I couldn't find from a mechanical or vehicular perspective, please let me know, because I would love to see just, things get a little more fleshed out than they currently are. If I'm completely off on something, if there's a choice that you think is an absolute spot on thing because you've played with Romania, and you think that they're worth playing in a different way than what I talked about with the triple howitzer list and provide some flamethrowers and some other maybe some armored support stuff like that, please do let me know down in the comments below, and I will see you next time.